Hey, everybody, welcome back for the next episode of Lessons from Terrible Students. As always, we are the Terrible Students. My name is Jeremy. That's Sarah. Sarah, say hello.
Hello, everybody.
So, if you caught our last episode, you know that in October, for some reason, Sarah wants to dress up. She could not. Last episode, she was wearing some cat ears. She could not find a suitable costume this time. So,
right
now, for some reason, she has convinced me to do so. So, the most she could get out of me was a hockey jersey. So that's why I am not in my usual business casual collared shirt. So I am wearing my hockey jersey. So this is the most that she could get out of me. So that's why if you're watching on our YouTube channel, I am wearing a Carolina Hurricanes hockey jersey. They are my preferred NHL hockey team.
Go Hurricanes.
So, that's right. Now, that being said, today we are talking about the difference between being an internal project manager and an external project manager. So we are going to explain what that means and kind of go over the differences between those here in just a bit. But as always, this podcast is brought to you by Lumius. At Lumius, we are your partner in learning.
That's right.
Okay, so like I said, we are going to be discussing the difference between internal PMing or project managing and external PMing. Now, most of this conversation is going to be handled by our fantastic project manager extraordinaire, Sarah. So, Sarah, if you don't mind, I'm going to take the definition because that at least I can do.
You feel confident about that one? Okay, I got you.
I'm going to let you kind of handle the most of it and just kind of jump in where appropriate. So, our overall definition that we're going to say for internal and external PMing. So, when you are an internal project manager, the clients are your colleagues. So, the people that you are project managing are also your colleagues. You all work for the same company. You are full-time, usually, employees of that company, and you're all paid by the same overall entity. So you are, let's say you work for company A, all of the people on the project also work for company A, and all of your paychecks are paid by company A. So you are an actual full-time employee, usually, of that company. The difference with an external project manager would be that external project manager is now not an employee of company A. So the external project manager, the client, are now your paying customers. So company A has hired that external project manager to manage this project. So that's where people like Sarah would step in and manage the project. And your clients are now your paying customers. So there's kind of a different relationship. And we'll kind of go into those relationship differences. That's where I'll pass it off to Sarah. But that's kind of how we're defining the differences between an internal PM and an external PM. So the internal PM is an employee of the company. An external PM is somebody that has been hired outside of the company. So they're not an internal employee of the company.
A vendor, if you will.
Right. They're a vendor, outside contractor, however you want to clarify them or whatever. So that's kind of the overall definition and difference that we're moving forward with on this episode between an internal PM and an external PM. And we're going to go over kind of how those relationship differences and can affect a learning and development project and how you need to understand those differences and work within your roles, whether you're an internal PM or an external PM going forward. And I'll turn this over to Sarah because, as she'll tell you, she's been both.
That's right. Yes. I have been both. And so, we chose this topic because it really is, it's a different experience, whether you're project managing something, for your internal team that you work with every single day, your colleagues, and versus, I've been hired by another company to come in and herd their cats, if you will, and drive a project through to completion. So you plan for those two things very differently. Everything, down to budget, resources, kind of playing off our last episode. Um, Part of your initial making sure you're aligned at the very beginning of a project, all of these things are really impacted on, like, are you working with your internal team, or are you being paid to come in and come in as a third party and whip it into shape, if you will? So first thing, we've covered the definition, and the next thing I kind of wanted to jump into was just the relationship differences, right? When you're project managing something internally versus externally, it's both of them have their potential risks and or I guess if you say positives, and things that can, really just be different overall when it comes to your relationship. And when I'm thinking about, let's start with internal. When I'm doing right now, obviously at Lumius, for the most part, I am project managing projects for our clients.
Right.
Every once in a while, we will, launch an internal project. So I still have, I still get a chance to do that every once in a while. But one thing that's just, different, no matter what, is your relationship with your internal folks, your colleagues. In some instances, you've been working with these people for years, whether you've been working with them at this company right now, or you've worked together previously at another company, or even maybe you were partners working at separate companies. Either way, you have this existing relationship with your colleagues, and that can go a long way. It can be good and it can be bad, right? But in my
Mm.
experience, it kind of takes some of the pressure off, if you will, when you're working with an internal group of stakeholders versus your external group, right? Um,
Depending on what
and
that history is, right?
yeah, and that's what I'm saying, right? It could sometimes it'd be good, and sometimes, well, I mean, I don't know what that looks like. I've never had a bad relationship internally with anybody.
I know it's
Um,
all right. It's getting deep. All right.
no, but yeah, just recognizing the difference in relationships. You've got these usually established relationships with people, whether they're good or bad. You're usually working towards the same goal overall as a company, so you have
Right.
that in alignment with each other. And it's just when you're going in and you're versus doing it internally with these people and work with every day, these established relationships. When you do it as an external PM, you're starting from square one most of the time, right?
Mm.
You have to build those relationships,
Right.
and that is so important. When just personally, my strengths in project management are not necessarily I am a type A, very um, organized, everything has a plan kind of person. In fact, if you knew me outside of work and I told you I was a project manager now, you're probably like, what? I have been known to be all over the place before, but no, I've definitely have, worked on the organizational skills part and I've got that pat down. But my strength is relationships. I love the people aspect of project managing. And one of the first things that is so important is developing those relationships with your stakeholders and your client,
Yeah.
gaining that trust and respect. And, if you don't have that, it's just a recipe for a disaster. So, um, there's differences in the relationships with your stakeholders and you as the project manager, whether you're internal or external. Both both have their, you know, goods and bads. So
Yeah,
when it
and I'll say,
comes to,
from an ID perspective, from when you're doing both jobs together, I think that's a lot of my experience is kind of the same way. Like, you really, really do have to build the trust, because when it comes to some of the, we've discussed this in previous episodes, and you have to have those hard conversations.
yep,
Those hard conversations are easier when you've built that trust and that rapport with your stakeholders, and they know that a you have good intentions, and you're
yeah,
not, when you're external, what you're trying to avoid is the misconception that you're trying to do less for the amount of money that you're being paid, right? Because the most of the time, uh, you've agreed on a contract price, and that's the money that you're getting paid. So what you want to avoid is any assumption that you're trying to do less work for that amount of money. So, a lot of times when you're having these harder conversations, a lot of it can go around scope creep and
yep,
things like that. Those conversations go easier when you have that trust and that rapport that you build, because when it's internal, it's a little different, because that yes, budget is a concern, but I feel like it's not as large of a concern when you're an
sure.
internal than an external. That um so
And let's just be real, Jeremy, when it comes to relationships, for example, if we're working on a project together internally, you're one of my stakeholders or my subject matter experts, and I'm waiting on you to complete an action item and you're late. I'm going to call you and I'm going to be like, get it together, Jeremy. What's going on? I'm
oh yeah,
really
I know.
disappointed. No. We just have that dynamic, right? Like it's easier, it's
Yeah,
kind of a joke. It's like, hey, but really, I need you to get this to me, please. You've already got that like that
yeah,
rapport built. You've got the, my personality, I'm being sarcastic, but I'm really being
right.
serious. And I know that if you have some sort of issue going on, whether it's a competing priority, I'm going to know like, oh yeah, that's right. We have that other thing going. I understand that you're going to be a day late. No worries. Right. Like it's just a completely different dynamic sometimes having that established rapport and being able to, I don't know, keep it real in a way, if you will,
Mhm.
in a like a lighthearted way, but getting things done. So that dynamic is definitely different when you're thinking about relationships. Sometimes you can't go full on, with new people. They might not get my personality. It can be a little abrasive.
Yeah, you can be a bit much sometimes. Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Wait, what? Wait, what?
See,
Huh?
there we go. There we go. Telling me like it is.
Uh, that's funny. No, you're fantastic all the time.
Oh, I appreciate it. Nobody is on it 100%, but I appreciate it. But yeah, that's really it. Differences in the relationship is one of your big it can impact a project. So, just building that rapport and getting to know your folks. That's why we like to do prior to starting projects, we don't just do kickoffs to explain. And our kickoff process, by the way, if you've never been, a part of our Illumius project kickoff, to me, they're fun, they're informative, they're an opportunity to get to know your project team. It's an opportunity for the project team to get to know me. We talk about, like, this is my preferred communication style. What's yours? It's a good opportunity. I love the kickoff phase because it really gives you that chance to establish that that new relationship. And it's important, first impressions are important. So my advice there is if you're going into a project, you're kicking it off with a new client, um, put the time in, like put the time in to learn what you can about your stakeholders and the people involved and really get to know their business. And if you can, do some do a little bit of extra legwork. If you know you're going to be working with a particular group of people that you have absolutely no experience with, for example, me going into a project working with a bunch of field technicians,
Mhm.
who do, I don't even know, something out in the field, uh, that I have no knowledge of. I'm going to go Google some things, before the project kickoff. So I know, like, what does a day look like in their life? And so
That's
that,
that's you just taught me something there, and that's interesting because and I mentioned, I don't remember what episode it was, but I mentioned previously that a lot of times before the first call, I'll start digging into source content,
yeah,
and so that I know as an instructional designer, so that I know a little bit about what the training looks like now, and what those
you
kind
can
of
speak
things
to
are.
it.
What you're talking about from a PM perspective is doing the same thing from a people perspective, learning who the people are, what the relationships are, and what where everybody sits, and kind of that thing. And I just never, for me, not being necessarily a people person, and we this, I'm not a people person. We are coming from
Well,
the host of a podcast, right? But
I think you
um,
are. You don't give yourself enough credit, but I know what you mean. You're an introvert, Jeremy. Like,
I,
you're
I
not,
am.
you're not,
I'm
being around people doesn't give you the same energy that it gives me. That's,
right.
that's really it. But
Exactly.
yeah,
Yeah. And it I spend energy when I'm around people, and I
yes.
have to, be around people, and things like that. But I would never, it's a light bulb just went off when you said that. I would never think about actually doing research into who is on the call, what their relationships to everybody is on the call, and knowing things like that. Like usually I'm thinking I'm going to go to these calls to learn that.
Yeah.
Um,
And
but
you are. You're going to learn a lot about people. Well, sometimes, it's also the first kind of icebreaker, if you will. People are still getting to know you. People don't speak up as much. But if you go into that knowing about them,
yeah, no, that
um,
would make sense. Yeah.
it's a faster way to break the ice and let people know that, like, you're invested. You're not just coming in to be like, we're doing this project, you're going to help me, I need your expertise, which is all true, but we can also be friends. We can have a cohesive working relationship, and we can make this not just a boring project that we feel, is maybe draining sometimes. We're also going to have a little bit of fun with it. Let's get to know each other.
Nice.
Yeah.
Learn something every day, Sarah. That's my
That is
goal.
such a compliment, Jeremy, that you just learned something from me, because I'm often learning things from you, especially in the world of development and
I don't know about all that,
tools,
but
technology, because
getting
that is
real thick in here now. But okay,
not my
let's
strong
table
suit.
that. Oh, that's funny. Okay. Yeah.
All right, so
So
relationships.
yeah,
Yes,
back to the
we
relationships.
know
Yeah.
that's
So
important off the gate, and the differences between what that looks like. It takes a little bit of extra work when you're coming in from an external point of view, and that's okay. Um, so then that brings us to our next topic, which is also, I think, very reliant on how you've established your relationship. And then we talk about the level of accountability
mm,
in an internal project versus managing an external project. And what I mean by that is, you know, if we're working together on a project internally, um, we may report to the same leadership. And we do, right? Whether that's our direct leadership or the overarching leadership in our business unit or the CEO or whomever,
yeah.
right?
At some
We are
point, that leadership comes together, right?
right. Yes. So we all report to the same powers that be, and that right there, just, we know there is a level of accountability that we can hold each other to. Not to say like, well, Jeremy, if you're not doing, your work and you're not completing your action items on time, I know who your boss is and I'm going to tell on you. It's, not so much in that way, but you just, who to go to if you need to, or engage if you need to, or say, hey, I'm finding that Jeremy is really overwhelmed right now, and I don't want to do that to him. So let's talk about his priorities. And if this is not something he can focus on right now, let's think of another plan, or, whatever that looks like. So it feels like accountability is a little bit easier sometimes. Again, we won't, hopefully you've got good relationships with everybody you work with. And unfortunately, we know that it's not a perfect world all the time, and that doesn't always happen. But
I was about to say, I think the flip side of that is, the scenario where you do both report directly to the same person, and maybe there's an issue where one of those don't have the best relationship. So now you're in a point where there's conflicting reports and all that kind of stuff. That's maybe the flip side of it, to where now either as the project manager or as the SME or the ID or something, you have this added wrinkle of your version of events may not match the other person of events, and you're both reporting to the same person.
Right.
Hopefully this does not happen. Luckily, again, this is not something that I've had happen. So I can see, I have seen this happen to other folks where, a couple of IDs that had disagreements were both reporting to the same person. And obviously, if they have two different opinions on the matter, they're reporting the same person. That particular manager has to figure out, okay, who's right.
Yep.
And they've got to make a decision on, how it goes forward. And they've got to figure out, how do we now deal with this? How do we come together and figure out how we work past this and get through this relationship? Because they still got to work together. The project still got to get done.
Yep.
So, and I won't go into what all happened because that's a long story, but it can be bad when everybody's internal as well. So there's a different level of, there's an easier level of accountability sometimes, but I think there's a higher level of accountability there sometimes too, when everybody's internal. There's not because from our side, I think a lot of times if there's a large disagreement, something like that, a lot of times we'll bring it up, but it's, hey, this is an agreement on your guys' side. We're going to take a step back while you figure this out.
Yep.
Because when we're not employees of the company, again, as externals, it's not our job to figure out that way forward.
Sure.
It's our job to document it after you figured it out. Now we can put as learning experts. Yeah. As learning experts, we'll give you our opinion from a learning perspective.
Yep.
And an outside perspective, as kind of, from an adult learning theory perspective, this is how you may want to do it or something like that. But from your business perspective, we can't offer that type of help.
Right.
So a lot of times we'll bring up the concern, we'll mention it,
make a recommendation,
but it's still the client's decision to make. So we take a step back, and it sounds bad, but this is where I'm kind of glad sometimes that we're external, because I've been in some of those meetings where that decision has to happen. And I've been in some of those where, okay, we're not leaving the room until this decision is made. And it's uncomfortable. It's not fun to be in there, right? Because
you're just sitting there observing, like, yeah. Oh, it's getting a little spicy in here. Oh.
Yeah, exactly. When people are getting mad, and then, as the, instructional designer that has identified the problem, a lot of times it's, okay, well, Jeremy, what brought this up? Well, see, what had happened was, And
Then you're
even
trying to
knowing that
be
I didn't
like
do anything wrong,
diplomatic about it, not hurt
Yeah.
anyone's feelings or offend
So,
anyone. Yeah, totally. We have all been there, Jeremy, for sure.
so from that point, sometimes I'm glad that we're kind of one step back from that because
Sure.
we're kind of the mediator, right? And it's like, okay, we can see where both opinions are coming from, and we can provide kind of that middle ground and provide and use our expertise and say, from a learning perspective, this is kind of the best way to go, with the caveat of, but it's your guys' business.
Right.
And at the end of the day, it's whatever works best for your learners and for your business and for your budget.
I have literally heard you say that exact sentence before, Jeremy, on a few occasions. It's
Yeah,
funny,
yeah, because
but it's 100% accurate, right? Like, you can offer your
yeah,
professional opinion, from what you're seeing from the outside looking in, what's worked best, for learners in your experience. And then, but as you said, at the end of the day, they ultimately need to make that decision because it's their business.
right.
Yeah,
Yeah, I mean,
totally.
because we're not their employees. We're like, they're the ones that have to make that decision, because the worst thing, in my opinion, as an external, is if we make that decision and then in implementation that project fails, we have now lost a client. Because
Yeah.
what they're going to do is they're going to say, okay, this failed. Why did it fail? Because this decision was made. Well, who made that decision? Well, that dude we hired made that decision.
Lumious. Yeah,
You
sure.
can't be in that position. You can't put yourself in that position. You have to, and you might think that your opinion is the best way to go about it, but if you force it in there and it doesn't work, you've burnt that bridge.
Yep.
So you have to, you can put your opinion in, but you have to let it know, hey, this is kind of what I think, but
This is
I am
my
outside,
unbiased
you are
opinion.
inside. You have to, right, you've got to identify your bias and say, I may not see everything that you guys see being internal employees. So, and I think that's key, because you don't have all the information if you're an external PM.
Sure.
You just don't, because you don't work there. So there may be something that you're not aware of. There may be, some small department, some thing coming down, some project coming down the line, some new thing, some project that happened 6 months ago that's going to affect this. You don't have all the information as an external employee. You just don't.
Nope. Yeah. No, you're right. It does take it almost takes some of that pressure off when you're coming in from the out external perspective. So, something else when we think about, the level of accountability is sometimes, just like you've got these, like the established relationships already with your
Mhm.
people, it can make it a little bit trickier because you also internal projects in that same way carry more emotional weight than an
Oh yeah.
external project, right? Just due to the nature of people's existing relationships. So,
Well, you're going to work with them again, right? Like,
exactly. Yep.
from another thing that I love about working here at Lumius is we get to work with all of these different companies and all of these different
Mhm.
people. There's always something new, and all of our different clients, they're bringing us all these different stuff that,
Yeah.
but for an internal ID, or an internal PM, or whatever, you're usually working with kind of the same people, and
Oh, yeah.
especially like a lot of times as an instructional designer, you're assigned to a line of business. Like,
Right. A
I've been assigned
program
to like
or a
tech
product.
ops, or field ops, or a product or something. So you
Yep.
are working with literally the same people over and over and over and over. So if that relationship starts to slip, yeesh,
Right. Yeah. Makes it a little tricky. Yeah.
that's where you go into, and this is something. So when we wrote this down, I thought about, where I wanted to kind of detour you a little bit.
Okay.
Um, so because this is something that I'm not necessarily great at. So I wanted to kind of get your opinion here. So let's say that something happens and you have damaged that relationship somehow, some way, but you're an internal PM, right? So you've got to repair this relationship somehow. Um, what's kind of the way to go about that? So okay, you've had a project for whether it was actually your fault or not, doesn't matter. You know, water under the bridge at this point, right? But you now have another project with this same team, that your relationship has now been damaged. So what is kind of the first building blocks of rebuilding that rapport that you would do to kind of, and for those of you listening, Sarah had no idea I was going to ask this question.
Yeah. Thanks, Jeremy.
It's not.
Well, and based on my professional opinion, no. So this is how I would handle that situation, Jeremy. If I had worked on a project and with an internal team and there had been moments of, tense situations, or if overall just the energy wasn't great, maybe, there was a lot of conflict during it. We're all coming back together to work on another project together. And you've got now this team of people who have bias in some situation, or they're making assumptions already about how things are going to go, and maybe the feeling isn't sunshines and rainbows, and like that's not a good way to kick off a project together. So I would say, in the spirit of, I personally value transparency. I know I've mentioned that several times, and I like to get it out all on the table. Like passive aggressiveness, I don't do well with that. It also never is valuable, especially in a project. And so I like to lead by example and say, I think you just get it out on the table, right? It's okay to acknowledge it and say, hey guys, we're all back in this together. I'm really excited to be working with you guys again, especially since we've had the opportunity to really learn about each other and the best ways to work with one another. And let's just go ahead and say, like, hey, we've had a postmortem after our last project. We've identified some of our points of failure, or where maybe we could have done better, or done things differently, or communicated in a different way to, all reach our end goal. So I just want to kind of revisit those before we kick off this project, so that we're all cognizant of these things. Basically, you don't want to make the same mistake twice. So let's just get it out on the table and say, this is something that I was not a fan of during the last project. Sarah, I don't like it when you send me something to review and only give me 2 days. That is not enough time. I'm not going to be able to give you 100%. I can only give you 50%. And that doesn't sit well with me. So cool. Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing that with me. I'm sorry that I put that pressure on you. Let's figure out a way. I will take a look at the project plan and I will finagle another couple extra days for you. It won't impact the overall completion date. This is why you build in buffer also. Right? Like, just like getting it out there, because, we're adults. We're not all going to agree with each other all the time, but we can all be mature and, recognize the differences and then move past it. So let's figure out where we could have done things differently, how we're going to do them differently on this project. And by the end of it, we're all going to be like, holding hands and singing Kumbaya.
But I think that's why I think you're so fantastic at what you do, because I think that's so difficult to do, to just be honest and upfront, because I think as people, not as, external, internal, or anything like that. I think as people, a lot of times our like knee jerk reaction is just to not mention anything and just
Right.
hope, right? To just to just hope it goes away.
Brush it
Not
under
that's it.
the, yeah.
And let's just hope it doesn't happen again. Well, I'm here to tell you, it's gonna happen again. It always happens again.
Hmm.
And I feel like I say this at least once an episode, but please listen, because we speak from our own failures, people,
Yeah.
because I have been that guy that doesn't say anything, and it happened again.
Yeah. Or
I have
it's
been,
even worse, or it's erupted even more
yeah,
because
well, yeah, because
we
it gets
didn't.
worse the second time, right? You're absolutely right. Like, because it builds every time. Like, if you don't, you're absolutely right, because it starts as passive aggressive comments.
Yep.
Like, it starts as a reference to the first project, to the first problem.
Oh, yes. Yes.
Oh
That's
yeah, oh
actually,
yeah, Jerry, you're gonna take a long lunch again. Hey Jerry, yeah, okay, great. Oh
to be
crap, here we
completely
go.
honest with you, passive aggressiveness triggers me sometimes. It almost makes me want to get it out there even more.
Yeah,
You know what I mean? If somebody says something and I'm like, well, no, let's dig into that together. You know, like let's peel back the onion on what's happened there and how we can, maybe avoid it in the future. But um you're right. Like the 5 minutes of discomfort it's going
hmm,
to require for you to like just speak up and say, I don't like this, or can we do this a different way?
yeah,
Which and is this is, we could do a whole podcast on communication and like how to deliver messaging in a right way to avoid defensiveness. But that's super important, right? Like especially as a project manager and just like starting
yeah.
from
I
a
feel like we
good
do need to
place.
add like rough conversations to the list. That may
Yeah.
be coming soon, everybody.
Yeah.
Having tough conversations. So we'll see if we can add that to the list of possible topics. But all
Yeah.
right, so I didn't mean to take us kind of off topic, but I
It was
felt
a
like that was
relevant
a good
question. It
deviation.
was
Yeah.
super relevant. Um, okay, so yeah, that's when it comes to accountability, it's just sometimes it's easier when you've been working with a group and you know what to expect and everyone's working towards the same goal. It's a little bit trickier sometimes when you're coming in from an outside perspective. You have you don't when I'm coming into a project and I'm meeting a project team, these people don't know me. They're not like, who are you to tell me I need to have this review done for you in 24 hours? Like there's just,
Yeah. Yeah.
it's again goes back to the importance of building that relationship in the beginning, but you can expect that it's going to be a little bit harder holding people accountable when you're coming in externally. Because you don't have as much say and your no offense, your opinion doesn't matter as much when you're coming in externally,
Yeah, I think that's a good way to put it. Like, where in their list of priorities does your email fall, right?
Low.
So when it comes to their day-to-day job, where does your request fall in? Because they have, like, we've all got our own list of goals or KPIs or whatever you're graded on every year that determines, you know, worst case scenario whether or not you keep your job,
Right.
best case scenario whether or not you how much
Get
of,
your
of an
raise.
increase you get in
Right.
salary, right? um so where in attaining these goals do your requests as an external PM, where do those fall?
Yeah.
And we talked a little bit about buy-in and things like that on a previous episode. So I think that's where you've really got to stick the buy-in. When you're an external, I think it becomes even more important, because when you're an internal, I know people check emails, and when I
Yeah.
mean by that is they check the domain of your email when you send them something. And they
Sure.
know when it's coming from an internal versus an external.
Oh, for sure. Who's it
So,
coming from? What's the topic? Is it important that I read it
yeah,
right now? Probably not as important as what I'm doing. So I'm going to put that off.
exactly.
For sure.
So
We're all guilty of it.
there's no hiding. Yeah, there's no hiding that you're like an external, because like my email is at Lumius. So when I'm working with a client, that's not, at company A, or that, that's their email domain is, John Smith at company A, or, whatever it is. If I send them an email, they know immediately that I am not an internal employee.
Yeah.
Now, does that color their decision? I don't know.
It
It
could.
may. Yeah. You don't know. So for some people it may, and I have had instances where it absolutely did. And because that domain was different, my request got, you know, filtered to the bottom,
Thrown
and it
off.
would be
Yep.
days before an email was returned. So yeah, I mean,
Exactly.
it does make your job harder.
Yep.
So
Yeah. So that's some of the, it could also be the exact opposite, right? You could have external people who are like, you know what? I'm going to prioritize getting this done for this person because I know all of these eyes are on me and there's a ton of people included on this email. And if I'm not, completing my action items on time, it's going to look bad. And then you could have the opposite from an internal perspective of whatever, I know Sarah and she'll be fine if I'm a couple of days late on this. Like that's less accountability, So there's two sides to it, So it's just different. Maybe not one's not better than the other per se. It's just different. So
yeah, I mean, there's pros and cons to both, and we've both been in kind of both seats, and there's, like I said, I enjoy where I'm at now primarily because I like learning different things. I've always been the type of person that, I want to learn new stuff. I want to learn different things, which is why I really, really enjoy working for Lumius, because we have, different clients where I've been
yeah.
lucky that I get to learn different industries and, how different companies train their folks and do that type of thing. To where when you work when you're an internal ID or PM, you end up almost becoming a SME of, like I said, a lot of times you're assigned to a specific department. So you almost end up
Yeah.
becoming a SME yourself, which in my
Absolutely.
eyes can be a good and a bad thing, right? Because it's a good thing because you become a SME. So a lot of times when they come to you and say, hey, we need to develop, a job aid or something on this, you can almost write it yourself and then just send it off for review to like a SME or a stakeholder. But on the flip side of that, you start to get your own like confirmation bias almost, or knowledge
Right.
bias, to where you're no longer looking at it from a learner perspective of, okay, where is the knowledge gap? Like it's that curse of knowledge that we've discussed on previous episodes of taking yourself out of the equation and thinking, what does my learner know? What do they not know? Because you're getting to the point where you're an expert on this type of thing, which is dangerous from an ID point of view.
Yeah.
So
It can be,
another way
right?
to look at it.
Yeah.
So, and I speak again from a place of experience. So when I'm writing things again, for those that haven't heard of my background, I was a field technician for 7 years. So when I first started doing training and developing training for field technicians, a lot of what I had to learn was, okay, remember, the people coming into this role do not know what you know. You
Right.
have to put yourself back to what you were 7 years ago and remember what you needed then, not what you need now. So
Yeah.
when you're an ID and you're assigned to a specific spot, or when you're a PM and you're assigned to a specific place, and then you're there for, potentially years, sometimes you get so head down into that you forget kind of that to back up into that learning view
Oh,
especially
100%.
when you're trying to maintain these relationships and things like that. So there's a whole different kind of danger in that, I think.
Yep. And
So
balance that you need.
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And in terms of accountability, something else that I think about is the financial aspect of it.
Mm,
Um, as an external person, when I think about the financial impact, right? If I work with this group of people and I manage their project and I just do a super crappy job, or we don't click at all and I don't even try to repair the relationship and I'm just full steam ahead, like, all right, screw it. I don't care if you like me or not. We're going to get this done. It's going to be a crappy job, right? And then we're going to lose them as a client.
yeah.
So there's that accountability, but also, so that's from my perspective of losing a client and being financially impacted. And then on the flip side to that, on the financial accountability piece, you've got sometimes that will actually kick people into gear at a partner, or the client that I'm managing, by just, I'm not going to remind them and say, well, don't forget, you're paying us to do this. And we've got, we've got this much time to do it, whether we do it or not in that time frame. I don't care. Cause if it's your fault that we don't, you've just wasted money and it's going to cost you more. Like, I'm obviously not going to say that, but, um, a lot of times the people who have hired us, the company, they know that they're spending money, and why would they not give it everything they've got? Why would they
Right.
not want to be accountable and give us everything that we need to make it a success? So there's some, just differences there when it comes to managing internally versus externally, and the financial impact, how more accountable, me being more accountable, because I want to make sure that these clients come back to us because they're happy with the work we've done,
Absolutely.
versus them too. Like, if we're paying Lumius to do this for us, I'm going to be accountable, and I'm going to hold my team accountable to get them what they need to do a great job. So sometimes that's a good thing, or, a lot of times it's a good thing. Sometimes people aren't always thinking about that. If you're not the person who's in charge of the budget, or you're not managing it or tracking it, it's the last thing that you're thinking about. But um, if you're the person, the manager who's taking money from your personal budget, um,
Right.
to get learning curriculum created, then that can add accountability and get you good partnership sometimes when they think about that part.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
even though
And
it's a
that
pain in the
that
butt, we
I
want to
think
make it worth it.
for an external, the client perception is a little bit more important, right?
Yeah.
Because you want to maintain that client relationship, because you want to be professional at all
Oh, for
times.
sure.
Like, not that you can't build, personal relationships with clients, because you absolutely can, but you want to remember that it is a professional relationship.
Right.
Um, and you want to be professional at all times, because those returning clients is what's going to keep you in business.
For
So,
sure.
that's the key of it, is to make sure that you want to maintain good rapport with the client, and that those clients, when they think of a training project, they think, I had a great experience with this company. So we have the budget. Let's go re-engage with them because we had such a good experience. Not only because you could put out a fantastic product, but if they didn't have a good experience working with you getting to that product, they may not come back to you. And I think
Oh,
that's
yeah.
that's something that maybe sometimes isn't quite acknowledged. Like, yes, that final product could be fantastic, but if it was just absolute hell getting there, excuse my language, but I just can't think of another word. But if it's
Yeah.
just absolute slog getting there, that may taint that relationship, even though the product was just absolutely fantastic at the end. If it's just so hard
Yeah, but
working
what
with
right?
you to get
At what
there.
expense? Your
Exactly.
your
Exactly.
employees' happiness, and
Right.
was it such a bad experience that, just the thought of having to do another project with this project manager makes them like want to call in for work for the next 2 weeks? Like,
Exactly.
you've got to.
Exactly. And that's why like managing that relationship all the way through to make sure it's a positive process for them all the way through the project, and you have a positive outcome. Like you've got a good and working learning outcome at the end is very important for externally. Like internally, they're kind of, I mean, unless you get laid off or whatever, they're kind of forced to work with you, right? Like you're the
Oh,
resource
for
they
sure.
have.
Yeah.
So, it is what it is. External, it's their choice to work with you. They don't have to work with you. You have to make sure that they want to come back and they want to work with you. So it's a different way of thinking. So,
Well, and I'm just going to be honest, a lot of times people's decision making is led by emotion. You
absolutely.
know? Like it goes back to what you're saying about, even though the product was good, the process to get there was crap, and I'm not putting myself through that again or my teams. So we're just not doing that. I'd rather pay another company more money if that's what it takes, as long as the experience is better. So,
Yeah. I mean,
it
when you
just
say, like, when you say somebody's name, the first thing that pops in your head is an emotional reaction, right? Like
for
when you
sure.
say somebody's name, the first thing that pops in your head is usually not a word, it's a feeling. Like
Hmm.
when you say somebody's name that you really don't like, it's usually like your first thought is not, I don't like that person. It's, ugh.
I was
Like,
just gonna say whenever I hear the word Jeremy, I'm like, Jeremy. I'm just kidding. Even if I'm talking about a completely different Jeremy. I'm just kidding.
ah, that's funny.
All right.
So,
Well,
yeah.
so we've got one more topic to cover, and that's really just one of the differences, which to me can be one of the biggest, is the difference in like requesting help, assistance, action items. You know, it goes back to all the building the relationship for sure. Everything actually goes back to that, as you can see as we've gone down this list, and just the importance of getting off on the right foot. But when I ask for something internally, let's say, hey Jeremy, can you do me a favor and can you go and collect all of the knowledge based articles that are um, useful for this learning
Right.
topic, right? Can you go do that for me? Can you get it to me as soon as possible? You're going to do that for me because we've got this good working relationship and you respect me and I respect you, and
Right.
we do each other favors, right? But if I'm coming
Yeah.
in as
I'm
an
going to send you
external.
some type of meme of like a guy throwing papers in the air, and then I'm going to send you what you need. Yeah.
Exactly, 100%. You're you're gonna whine about it, but you're gonna do it. No, or especially if I forgot to do something, right? Like, or I keep using me as the bad example here, Jeremy. So I'm gonna flip it on you. So let's say you come to me and say, "Hey, Sarah, I don't have this deliverable ready for you yet. I know you're supposed to send it through quality today.
Right.
I'm going to be a little late. Can we send it tomorrow? Is there any other time we can shave off somewhere else to make sure we're not delivering late for the client?" Absolutely. Like, I know, sometimes things get missed, whatever the situation is. Not a second guess. Absolutely, Jeremy, I got you, right?
That
Externally,
is not something that happens, folks. That is my personal, I hate that. I hate being late on deadlines. That's my fear. Go ahead.
okay, yes, no,
So
that doesn't happen. That was just an example. Uh,
it does happen every once in a while.
um,
Uh,
but
and it drives
if
me
I were
crazy
to,
every time.
right, But if I were to go, if I'm an external project manager and let's say I drop the ball on something and I go to one of my external stakeholders and say, hey, I really need your review on this script before I send it off to our professional voiceover. And I'm sorry, I should have sent this. Oh, sorry, I keep dropping my microphone. I apologize. Maybe I should tighten it. That's what that little button's for.
Sarah talks with her hands a little bit, so
I don't know what you're talking about, Jeremy. Sorry, I got us off course, but so yeah, right. The going to an external person and saying, "Hey, I accidentally forgot to ask you for this a couple days ago. Can you please prioritize this and get me your review here in the next couple hours?" There's a good chance that person is going to be like, "Yeah, I'm sorry, I can't do that. I can't have this to you for at least another couple days." They've got no, they don't owe me anything. If there's no relationship, or even if there is a relationship there, I'm still probably not at the top of their priority level. So sometimes it's just easier, when you can just go to somebody, whether it's internally or even if it's an established relationship with a person at a partner or a client versus somebody who's never worked with me before. Like, yeah, sorry, I don't know you. Next time, get it to me on time and I'll get it to you on time. So it can be a little bit harder because I carry less weight when requesting action items from one of our clients.
Right.
So,
right.
Yeah.
So yeah. So, I mean, in the end, it's all about the relationship building, right? Like
that's really what
how you approach those things.
Yeah. Yep. And I'd say really the important thing to walk away with here, if you're new at project managing, or maybe your strong suit when it comes to project management is the organizational piece, and you literally have, a date and a time slot and expected, everything you have is, to the T, perfectly organized, but maybe that's your strong suit, but the relationship building is not. Just throwing it out there, it is totally, totally worth it to make that a priority, the relationship piece, not just project managing the project to make sure it's being, completed on time and well, but just knowing how important it is to really, really define those relationships in the beginning. And it's just going to make it so much easier for you. And when you do have situations where maybe we are running behind on a deliverable or something, I feel far more comfortable going to a client that I have a good relationship with and saying, I'm so sorry, we are going to be just a day late on this. It won't impact the rest of the timeline, whatever. Far more comfortable going to somebody and saying that, we dropped this ball, but we're going to make it right. And most of the time they'd be like, no worries, no problem. Right. But if it's somebody who doesn't know me or has maybe a bad taste in their mouth for something I said or did, there's not going to be as much probably understanding, if you will. So just something to think about, when you're project managing internally versus externally, and maybe knowing where to spend more of your time. For example, doing your research before you go into a kickoff and meet your stakeholders and all of your subject matter experts, right? Spend a little bit of extra time. Go do a little, Facebook stalking, LinkedIn stalking, Google searching, use your detective skills. Everyone's got them now,
That's funny. We do not recommend Facebook stalking. I just want to put that out there.
I'm just joking.
On that note, we appreciate everybody listening. We'll catch you next time. And thanks for listening. Thanks all.
Indeed. Bye, everybody.